Hey everyone, welcome back to the Untrivial Podcast. My name is Allie Nelson. I can't believe we are already halfway through January. I feel like this month I find is usually the hardest and the slowest for me, but this year I feel like it's been flying by. I don't know if it's the same for you, but I am just so looking forward to the warmer weather and the longer days in the next few months. I'm hoping you're still feeling energized with the new year just kicking off. And if you're someone who's looking to enhance your wellness this year, this episode could be for you. My guest today is Justin Glaser. Justin is the author of the book Sweat: Uncovering Your Body's Hidden Superpower. This book quickly reached the Amazon's bestseller list, and through a blend of personal narratives, expert interviews, and cutting edge research, Sweat reveals sweat's wildly underappreciated role in health, vitality, and disease prevention. Today, Justin and I discuss why sweating is so important for our health, the toxins we're exposed to that need to be removed from the body, why and how sauna should be added to your wellness routine, and so much more. I've linked Justin's book and his socials in the show notes below, and I really hope you enjoy the show. And now, let's get into the episode. Justin Glaser, welcome to the Untrivial Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, I am so excited to speak with you today about your book, Sweat, and hear all of the amazing things you learned. But to start, for those people who may not be familiar with you, I would love if you could share a little bit about who you are and your story.
Yeah, so like you just mentioned, I just recently released a new book. I don't know if you could see it, but here's another copy. Sweat: Uncovering Your Body's Hidden Superpower. I released that a couple months ago. And so leading up to that, my early 20s, I had a bit of a health crisis, chronic fatigue, brain fog, anxiety, just a whole bunch of symptoms just kind of really came to a head. And when I graduated college, I really felt like I needed to get it handled or things wouldn't go so great. So I tried pretty much every possible option under the sun to kind of improve it. I became obsessed with solving this. And that involved Western doctors, Eastern doctors, every type of test you can imagine, every type of Eastern approach. So from the most scientific to the most like woo-woo in terms of trying to figure out what was causing this. Wasn't sure if it was mental, physical. And ultimately nothing really helped for almost 18 months. And at about the 18-month mark, I tried using a sauna and felt more relief after one session than everything else combined, really. And so I didn't understand why. That led me to continuing to use a sauna, but also researching what could be like the rationale, like the thesis behind why this was helping more than everything else. And ultimately, it became very clear why it was helping more than anything else. And I hadn't really heard it being talked about except for these very niche communities explaining sort of the theory behind why sweating and sauna could be perhaps one of the most overlooked aspects of our health. And so it really transformed my health. It took me from feeling terrible to good to then great, like a kid again. And I, had all this information. I didn't really want to write a book, but I felt like it just wasn't out there. And so this year I decided to put that information together and share it with people.
That's awesome. And I'm so glad that you found a solution after so much time feeling so negative. So happy to hear.
Me
I
too.
want to get into
Yeah.
all things sweat with you, but let's just start with like the basics. Like, what is sweat? What is that process, and why do we need to do that?
Yeah. So the main like thesis that I'm arguing for and that the message I kind of want to spread is that we vastly underestimate the impact of toxins and chemicals in our health. And once you kind of take that on and start to see kind of what exposure we have in the modern world, you start to realize that that is arguably like the issue driving mental and physical health issues and disease issues. And so that can be overwhelming. And I lay that out at the start of the book, sort of that case, and quite convincingly, I think. And the second piece is realizing that sweat is actually the best way to get these substances out of the body. And so when we do that, we're getting all these things. Like I think I was trying to think of a better definition of toxins and these chemicals, but pretty much just defining them as like the opposite of a medicine, right? So just things that reliably, predictably cause problems in the body. And so by getting them out, the body can return to the way it's meant to function. And so you can get back to that kind of like childhood level of vitality and energy and that side of things. And so the new research over the last 20, 30 years kind of proving that sweat actually is the like best detoxification pathway, showing when we scrape sweat from people in the saunas that it has chemicals and toxins in the sweat that's not even showing up in the urine, showing it's preferentially moved through the sweat.
Oh,
So it's kind of those two pieces where it's The toxins is the main issue, coming to grips with that, and then realizing that sweat is the best way to get it out. And so that's kind of where I start with the whole thing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, what kinds of toxins are people absorbing into their bodies? Like, is it from the environment, from our food? Is it everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, so there's things we've been exposed to forever. So like things like heavy metals, which can, have been on the planet for, I don't know, since the very beginning, but they've been around pre, the Industrial Revolution.
Mm.
And then we have kind of the last 60 years where we've introduced tens of thousands of man-made chemicals into the environment in astonishing quantities. I think it's kind of a bit of, you wouldn't notice this unless you had to notice this. And so, there's no reason to be aware of this unless something comes up like I experienced where you start looking for answers and it becomes very clear, right? Like, we used to have lead in our gas. All of our clothing, a lot of it is polyester, and our skin is a bit transdermal and can get in through the air quality in your apartment, the paint, not meant to overwhelm or freak people out, but it's just, we're just kind of in a toxic soup. And so it's not, I don't think it's too tin-hatted to say that. I think it's just acknowledging the reality of the situation. So it's really the last 60 years where this chemical issue has become a real problem. And causation isn't correlation, but also recognizing that we've seen a massive increases across the board in a lot of other things, in congruence with other issues like changes in diet, things like that. But, it really is sort of a modern issue. And this is kind of something we've had as a solution, fortunately, kind of like built in. So,
Okay, so we're learning we are exposed to tons and tons of toxins in our daily life. Obviously the solution is sweating them out, but is there also an element to minimizing exposure, or how would we even go about doing that if they're
yeah.
they're everywhere?
Yeah, I made a simple little graph in my book called like the toxin vitality equation. So just on the top half is how do you maximize your detoxification,
Mm.
which is what most of the book is focused on in terms of sweating and sauna and these different practices. And then on the bottom half is how do you decrease your exposure as much as possible? Because if you do those two things, you're kind of taking care of the issue as best you can. Ultimately, you're going to have some level of exposure. So it's like, what are the low hanging fruit things you could do to protect yourself? I don't do all of them. I try my best, but the main ones are you're exposed to your shower water every day. So shower filter, the quality of the water you drink, air filters in your apartment, places where you are 16 plus hours a day, things like that. So it's not easy, but kind of just tackling the low hanging fruit, I think is important.
Yeah, definitely. How often should we be sweating, or how much should we be sweating on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis? I feel like I don't really sweat unless I'm doing a workout, which is some of the time. I know being physically active is obviously going to help you get that sweat out, but is there a recommended amount?
Yeah, it's a bit, it's really just to get this stuff out of your body that's accumulating is kind of the main reason. There's other benefits to saunas, but in terms of the sweat component, it's kind of aiming for 3 times a week, 20 minutes of like profuse sweating. So you have a towel, you wipe it, within a second, new sweat appears. You want 20 minutes of that. So you're going to go through like 1 or 2 towels, not to be gross, but like kind of like sweaty towels that you're going to need to go through. And the easiest way to do it is sauna. And so that's what I kind of prioritize in the book. There are other options. People can go play tennis in the heat if you're in Florida or something like that.
Mm.
You can run really hard or go to the gym really hard. It's just really difficult to get that level of sweat as easily as you can with a sauna.
That makes sense. So sauna as a practice, I feel like it's been around for quite some time. I think it's kind of coming back in the wellness space, like cold plunge
Mhm.
sauna. That's very much a new thing that people are, exploring, but it's actually been around for so long. Like what's like the history of sauna? What did you learn in your investigations?
I start the book with that to kind of, the word sweat is kind of like a weird loaded term. We kind of have associated with grossness. I think it's not, it kind of is. It's not like the greatest thing in the world, but just trying to change the perception around it as well as sort of these practices. And so the first chapter is the history of sweat and sauna and sweat lodges. And so looking at the cultures around the world that use them. And so in my research, it was really wild to see that most cultures have some sort of sweat practice. The Native Americans had sweat lodges, to the Peruvians, to African tribes, to Russian banyas, to the German Aufguss. There's all these disparate cultures using sauna or sweat lodges for different reasons. They were using it before this modern issue, and they were using it for whether that was like bonding, community bonding, or purification rituals or initiation rites. There was purpose to it, or mental health, or dealing with trauma, or things like that in their own sort of language. So it was really interesting to see that this is something humans have used for centuries. And now it takes on kind of a new connotation because it's more important than ever. But it's not some new biohack, right? It's not some new thing that like we're inventing some new fad. This is something wired into us since the
Yeah.
beginning.
It's like re-exploring something that's always kind of been there or
Yeah,
coming
exactly.
back into popularity. I understand that. So if we think about getting enough sweat, we take up sauna practices, we get into it. What are the benefits of sweating at this recommended amount, that 2, 3 times a week for those hardcore 20 minutes?
So there's kind of two classes of that, right? So one is what I experienced, which is my energy levels shot through the roof. My mental clarity got better. My mood improved. My skin got better. Not medical advice, but I got sick less. And so there's kind of that immediate side to it. And then there's the side that you don't really see and you never really will. But the idea being these chemicals and toxins are linked to a lot of diseases that can get you, whether they're carcinogens, so linked to cancers, or potential links to Alzheimer's and these different things. So everyone's a little bit unique, but there are those two sides to it. There's immediate feel good benefits, and then there's the staving off the things you won't see. So yeah,
Interesting. So sweating out those chemicals, like, is it proven that you can, like, reduce your risk of, say it's those cancers or things like that if carcinogens are present and as a toxin?
there haven't been studies on that, and I'd love to see it. But the idea is pretty solid. So one example I use in the book is an instance of high toxicity, which was 9/11 victims.
Mm.
And so they went through a very specific sauna protocol, something called the niacin sauna protocol. Thousands of people exposed to toxic fumes, couldn't go to work, tremors, chronic fatigue, stuck in bed, on medications, asthma, just a whole host of just terrible symptoms. And some of those people went through this protocol. The initial batch was 500 people, which was kind of like sauna on steroids. A lot of these chemicals store in your fat, and niacin is something that opens the fat cells and allows them to be released. So all these stored toxins go into the bloodstream and you sweat it out. So think of it like the highest level of sort of detox, essentially. And so these people were taking inhalers and pills and trying all this stuff, but this got to the root problem, which was the toxins, and got them sweated out. So you'd look at their towels, there are pictures of this, like firefighters showing their towels after a sauna session. It would be blue from the manganese, so like a heavy
Oh
metal.
my
It would show
god.
stains on their towels. Yeah. And so it's
Wow.
clear visual evidence of it coming out. But the other piece is they measured all these people afterwards, and all 500 of them improved. I think they showed improved cognitive performance. Their IQ tests went up because a lot of these chemicals can store in the brain and affect brain function. Their postural sway test improved in terms of their balance. The woman I interviewed, they didn't recognize her before and after appearing in Washington when she was advocating. She sounded like Darth Vader, and this completely cured her of it.
Wow.
And so that's an extreme example of toxicity. And anecdotally, she shared with me, she runs the, just kind of advocating in DC to bring that protocol to veterans and other people with issues and things like that. Anecdotally, she shares that the community that still stays in touch, who recovered through that protocol, which ultimately became about 5,000 people, their mortality rates are much lower. Their incidences of cancer are much lower. And so she sees a strong, I haven't seen that data, but she's commented anecdotally that she's seen that correlation. And so that's one study I'd love to see, is taking, say, 1,000 ordinary people, putting them through the niacin sauna protocol, measuring them for 20, 30 years, and comparing that to a control group, essentially. But no one's really incentivized to put that money behind a research study like that, really. So maybe I can do a Kickstarter or something. But
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Why do you think no one's incentivized to explore that?
I don't think anyone can make money off of it.
Not big
So a
sauna?
lot of these, not big sauna, yeah, no big sauna. That's funny. Yeah, so I don't. I think it would have to be kind of a nonprofit effort, and so part of my goal with the book is to spread these ideas and hopefully get people who have influence and people who potentially buy into the ideas to put resources behind it for things like that.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if you buy into that idea, and if that's true, then everyone should be going through a protocol like that, because it would impact disease across the board. But I think we had a brief conversation before. there's no incentive from sort of the current system to, even if they believe all of these ideas, to act on that in any way. It would have to be some sort of disruptive force putting something
Mhm.
together.
Mhm. And is that just because if we're thinking of things like hospitals or the medical system, they're looking to make money? Is that your hypothesis?
Yeah, yeah. I don't think it's a good or evil thing. It's just their mission statement isn't how do we make the healthiest, most vibrant human beings we possibly can, and they're not filtering the world through that. So they're filtering it through how do we take care of sick people and stay profitable. I would imagine that's more in line with how they operate, and so because of that, that's what's steering the ship.
Mm.
Um, so it would require more of the former type of thinking to do something about it.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the interview and investigative side to your work. So, you mentioned that you were going through your own health complications. How did you go about uncovering all this information? Who did you talk to, and how did you get people to chat with you about the potential, positives and negatives of what was going on?
Yeah, great question. At the start, I think it was discovering sauna helped me, and then I was Googling, researching. I think I joined a couple of Facebook groups, and one of them was a 50,000 member, specifically nice and sauna Facebook group. So specifically that protocol, the 9/11 protocol, that used during 9/11, but has been used for other purposes. And so that was 50,000 people, similarly, like some mystery symptoms, things they couldn't deal with, ultimately coming to that group somehow. And so it was a big, like, mind share of ideas, some of which were great, some of which were kind of loony. But ultimately, I got a lot of information from that group and the group's owner, the founder of the group, who his story was, I think 30 years ago, he had short term memory issues. And he came across an article that diet soda could impact memory. And so he was drinking Diet Coke all day long. And so he stopped and he went, oh, my memory's back. I'm just noticing that there's a link between what I put in me and how my performance. And that got sent him down a crazy health rabbit hole, kind of coming at those ideas around toxicity, believing toxins were the most significant component of health, and then building this group around sauna and niacin. So I learned a lot from that group. And then from there, kind of branching out once I put the thesis for the book together, deciding who to reach out to get more information, right? So I don't have a medical background, so I wanted to more be like a journalist, kind of having the conversations and putting the ideas together. So on the toxin side, tracking down the writers of these research papers, one of which was Harold Zeliger, he was in his 80s. He's in his 80s when I spoke to him, who gave me kind of more context for his research and what he's found around toxicity and the studies and the research that he hasn't seen that he'd like to see. Coming across the 9/11 component, reaching out to 9/11 survivors, having multiple conversations with them, people with heavy metal poisoning, using sauna to heal. So I kind of, once I had the skeleton of the book, the places where I wanted more information, I reached out to people to have the conversation.
That's so cool. I feel like you would learn so much and hear so many super amazing stories and people improving vastly from something that seems so simple. And for how simple it is, correct me if I'm wrong, I still don't feel like it's a super common practice for the average person to be sauning multiple times a week, right? Like, is this gaining popularity, or like how popular do you think sauning is, like, current state?
It's definitely gaining popularity. I was considering starting a portable sauna company because there's no one on the market. We could talk about the sauna component of this, but I got a research report, and I think it's growing like 20% year over year in the US,
Oh,
which
wow.
compounding is quite strong.
Okay.
So it's definitely gaining, but I don't think people are saying, I need to sauna multiple times a week in order to detoxify from this inevitable exposure I'm getting to protect my health and prevent disease. I don't think that's like the thought process. I think people are like, oh, I feel good. And
It's warm.
it seems to be, I feel better throughout the day. I feel more resilient. Yeah, I feel like it's you know, those reasons. So, which is great, but it's not the thesis, those ideas, I don't think are what most people are doing it for.
Yeah, I feel like every time I've done sauna, it's been in, like, a spa context or, like, a getaway context. They'll have a sauna, but if I go to the
Mhm.
gym or I work out, it's not typically something I go for afterwards or during the week. So,
Yeah.
maybe I know we've talked about the benefits a little bit. Let's say you were just kind of an average person who's, I don't know, kind of sedentary, maybe exercises here and there. Maybe they're not putting themselves to like that level of sweating each time. Maybe they
Mhm.
go for like long walks. What what is happening if we're not sweating enough? Because I think, we obviously sweat to a degree every day, just day to day, but if we're not doing those kind of deep sweating protocols, what's
Mhm.
happening to us?
I think we're all different. So my experience was a lot of the research shows that these toxins, like poison mitochondria function essentially. So,
Oh
which is like
no.
what
That's the
creates your
powerhouse
like
of the
energy
cell.
production. Exactly. Yeah. Not that I can, that's about as deep as I can go into the science, which was always interesting, right? So I talked to like the toxicology expert who it's like the PhD level talking to like the high schooler and then me writing it for the middle schooler.
Right.
So, I can't go too deep in, there's only levels to my knowledge, but what's happening essentially is it depends on what you're dealing with. So if you have brain fog, it's most likely tied to this to some degree. If you have low energy, it's most likely tied to this to some degree. If you have weird mood swings and things like that, it's potentially tied to this to some degree. And so there's kind of I don't know how to describe it other than kind of like a leap of faith in that there's like a better experience you can have day to day by making this part of your life, which I think because you're a one of one, you don't have anyone to compare yourself to other than setting up an experiment for yourself of, okay, if I go to the gym 4 times a week, how am I going to feel? Let me do that for a month and track it.
Mm.
If you do the sauna 3 times a week and do this for a month, how do you feel? And so some people have wild experiences like I do. And then some people not as extreme. On the other side, though, the argument, like we said, is potentially staving things off down the line, which we know for sure with sauna studies, and that's been kind of going crazy on Instagram and TikTok in terms of like these clips of people talking about these studies around sauna in terms of all-cause mortality going way down. The more you sauna, essentially, the less risk of you dying there is. Your heart, cardiovascular health goes way up. And so that's more, I think it's more related to the heat than the actual sweating component. Though I think you can argue it's combined for the reasons we just discussed. But it's kind of hard to say until someone starts trying and implementing it in their life. But overwhelmingly, the people I know who kind of read the book and said, I'm in, and then started doing it, report amazing things. One of my good family friends, eczema for years, tried a bunch of things, completely cleared up once he got a sauna and started using it regularly.
Wow.
Inflammation goes down. One of the guys who's kind of a pioneer of this is named Dr. Joe Pizzorno, who I couldn't get on a call. Unfortunately, he's just impossible to reach, but he's considered like the godfather of functional medicine is kind of the quote around him. And he has been a huge like proponent of the idea that toxins are kind of the main thing. And so he's been sweating and setting up his home to be like, he's a very low toxin lifestyle kind of person. And he's in a basketball league. And he was talking about how he's been in it since he was like 30 and he's like 74 now, I think.
Oh, wow.
And by the time, as every year, the age cohort, once everyone hits like 50, people started falling off the league because like, they have joint pain, they have inflammation, they have all these issues. And he's been still in it into his 70s, and he attributed it to the low toxin lifestyle. He is such a lower toxic load of these things that steal all of these functions from us, that he's able to just keep going. And so I kind of buy into that based on everything I've learned.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How do you feel about those, they're like sauna blankets or like sauna
Hmm.
beds? If you don't have a sauna in your house or if you don't have a sauna at your wellness club or gym, are those good enough? Like, could we buy a little sauna blanket and do the same thing?
So the sauna industry is unregulated, so they can make claims without anyone really coming after them to some degree. So the two kind of things to look out for with saunaing is toxic materials and then low EMFs. And so if you think of like a sauna, or if you
Wait,
think
wait,
of
wait.
toxins,
What's an EMF?
what's in the electromagnetic frequencies. And so
Okay.
it's, again, I can't get too scientific with it, but essentially there's arguments about how bad it is for you, but essentially it's radiation.
Okay.
Um,
And that would be it,
and
sorry, in like the blankets as opposed to like a wood sauna, right?
I believe infrared saunas here that infrared saunas it's definitely something to look out for.
Okay.
Dry saunas, I don't think it's an issue to look out for.
Okay, cool.
For sure, infrared saunas because that's what most people are buying for their home,
Okay.
and they should be aware of, and the blankets and stuff. And so in that group, unfortunately, most brands don't pass that sort of test of do they not have toxic materials in the build and are they low EMF? And so the issue, particularly with kind of closed off saunas, is you're essentially creating a hot box. And so if there's glues, there's bamboo, if there's flame retardants, and you're heating that up, you're releasing what's called VOCs into the air, and you're doing the opposite of what you're in there for. So you're essentially breathing that in. So there are brands that do it well. Unfortunately, a lot lie about it. And so that group, people will like buy one and then they'll do a video of them walking in and the EMF meter goes crazy, or they go and get a VOC report and it shows that there are toxic materials in the builds or things like that. And so unfortunately, that is something to look out for. And really none of the sort of portable options passed the sniff test, which is unfortunate, and why I think I mentioned earlier I was considering starting it, but decided not to. It's just too much, just too much of a headache.
Yeah, that would be an undertaking, but sounds like
Yeah.
a needed one. Okay, so be wary, be a little bit cautious if you're looking into infrared saunas or those kind of portable options. So the best kind of
Yes.
sauna is what kind?
I think you shouldn't use a steam room. So steam rooms, there's three types of saunas really. So you can think of it like a steam room, a dry sauna, or an infrared sauna. A steam room is like, you walk in, it's wet, it's dark, it's steamy. And then mold essentially grows in wet, moist, dark places. So it's kind of common in steam rooms. Plus you have tap water that you're breathing in, which isn't great. So
Mm.
I advise against steam rooms, plus blocking the ability to sweat to some degree because of the steam in the air. So dry saunas and infrared saunas are both fantastic. And in infrared sauna, it's not as much of a adversity test because it doesn't feel as hot, but it's raising your core body temperature.
Mm.
So a dry sauna typically feels like you're really fighting to sweat and like it's hot as can be. Infrared sauna, you're like, oh wow, I'm sweating, and it doesn't feel that hot. So this is interesting. Both are fantastic though. And so typically if you go to like a gym or a spa and it's like a big communal sauna, it's going to be a dry sauna. But a lot of the one person ones are infrared, or
Yeah.
two or three person.
I
Yeah.
feel like dry saunas, oh my goodness, when you try and go in them sometimes, it feels like it blocks your ability to breathe because it's just like such
Mm.
hot air. I always struggle
Yeah,
with
it's
those.
intense.
An aside, still related very much to sweating, but this is kind of like a niche or niche as you pronounce it thing. Some women I know look into getting Botox in their underarms to prevent sweating. In your eyes, is that a really bad idea based on what we've learned so far?
I don't think it's great. So that's called hyperhidrosis, is when you over sweat. And there's not really clear research that I could find on why that's the case. I think the main argument that seems to make sense is in the same way, if you're about to go public speaking and you're nervous, you get like kind of sweaty palms, maybe, or something like that. And that's kind of like a fight or flight response. And so the argument is it's an overactive fight or flight response causing the hyperhidrosis, the excessive sweating. I haven't looked too deeply into solutions. I'd imagine trying regular meditation practices or things to kind of calm that response down and see if that helps. And I don't think it's advisable to, block your body's natural process for an aesthetic reason, though I can understand the reasoning. So yeah. And then the other argument is potentially it's like your body really is trying to detoxify because it knows it needs to push it out. And so maybe you should make sauna part of your practice and see if that helps with your hyperhidrosis, which I haven't seen. I haven't heard many case studies of that, people trying that.
Mm. Yeah, that would be really interesting. If
Yeah.
you lived in a really hot climate, say you lived in like the rainforest or Texas in the summer, would
Yeah.
that be sufficient in terms of if you were outside, say you like work outside, would that be enough to kind of not have to sauna if you're like a landscaper or you work outside in really hot climates?
Yeah. I mean, if you're dripping in sweat for 20 plus minutes, hopefully you have a towel and you can wipe off and you have minimal clothing on, which is ideal. So if you can work with, if you're a guy and you can work with your shirt off in shorts, that's certainly a great option. It's just, I think it's difficult to get that level of sweat on.
Yeah.
So I have a good friend who plays tennis in Florida like 5 times a week, and he's drenched by the end of it. And
Yeah.
so I think that's great. It's just not. I don't think most people. The nice thing about sauna is it doesn't require that level of exertion, and it's just kind of guaranteed. And most people don't live in that kind of heat
Yeah.
climate. I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if you were an avid like spin class goer or workout class goer where you are drenched for that workout? Would that be sufficient or do you still recommend sauna in addition to an exercise practice?
Well, I don't think we've measured sort of the amount of sweat, but it probably feels like a lot, but I don't think it's as much as you probably need. But it's certainly better than not doing anything. And so I think it would probably make sense to incorporate sauna as well, even if you're going to spin 3 times a week.
Yeah, definitely. So you talk a little bit in your book too about how or why sauna is really overlooked in disease
Mhm.
prevention. I know we talked a little bit about the incentive. Are there any other reasons why it's only gaining popularity kind of again in recent years?
I think the overwhelming reason is just prevailing wisdom and just it's hard for new ideas to take on when the group consensus is something else. It's a lot it's a lot harder to say something out of the box when there's not a lot of people behind it than when you say something that looks wacky, but millions of people believe it. So if millions of people believe SSRIs are the best way to deal with depression or something like that, and you say that, you're not at risk of getting kicked out of the group.
Mm,
So you feel safe in the herd, essentially. And so I think just a big part of it is kind of getting loudspeakers, essentially like megaphones, to kind of keep saying the things that are a little counterintuitive that most people don't believe. And then hopefully it hits a critical mass where those ideas kind of spread like wildfire. The carnivore diet, for example, you were crazy, I think, 10 years ago if you believed that you should eat mostly meat and fruit.
right.
And now I have doctor friends who are like, oh, that could make sense, even though they would have like literally like broken up as friends with you if you said that 10 years ago, because the culture's kind of accepted it. So I think there's a real like safe humans. We don't want to be kicked out of the tribe. And so I think that that's a big part of it. It's just not wanting to have ideas that most people don't believe.
Yeah. I think in the wellness space too, though, there's always something new. There's always a new idea or protocol or a resurgence. And
Hmm.
sauna to me kind of feels like it's very much in that category right now, kind of alongside cold plunge. I know there's a few places, even in like downtown Toronto, there's a place called like Othership, and there's a couple others that the whole like wellness like location and what they're there for, the business is cold plunge sauna community. And so, are you seeing more practices of sauna integrated with something else like cold plunge or anything else?
Well, I mean, that's the most common pairing I would say is the sauna cold plunge. I'm here in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and it's been interesting to see new places opening up for specifically just the one I just went to. I think it's called the Kari. I walked in. It's just a membership club to use the sauna. And like Monday at like noon, people were there and I met with the owners and apparently they just have a wait list now. It's already sold out. So it's definitely spreading. In terms of pairing it with things, I think it's more just integrating into whatever else you have going on for the reasons, for the reasons I shared, hopefully. So
Mhm. How would you go about suggesting people integrate sauna more and more into their daily life?
yeah, I think the hardest part is making it doable and fit into your routine and lifestyle. So there's kind of two options. There's you either find a place locally that you can go to, or you purchase one for your home. Obviously, if you have one in your home, I think your dosage is going to go up. That's been my experience. I got one this year, and I do lay out in the book kind of like steps for how you can find one locally and what to look for. So, it's going to be difficult if you have to drive 2.5 hours to go to a sauna place 3 times a week, right? When I was going through that kind of hard period where it was like I was kind of healing, the closest one I had, I was living in Manhattan. The closest one I had was it wasn't even like a convenient subway or anything. It was just an annoying 20-minute walk, and they didn't have a shower there, so I'd walk there, sauna, towel off as best I could, but probably still be a little sweaty.
Mhm.
Put my clothes on, and then walk back in like the summer heat, then shower, and it was like 2.5 hours every day. I would have to do that, and so it wasn't like boo, but like it wasn't ideal.
Right.
So it depends where you live. It depends your context, and first step I think is just finding out what your options are. So is there something close? Is it affordable? Or can you buy one for your home that makes sense and fits kind of also looking out for the criteria we discussed. Not to plug my book again, but I kind of go through all this in the book if anyone's curious.
Yeah. Can you share how much, like, if you were to buy one for your home, how much would that cost somebody to get like a good
Mhm.
quality, passing all those checks kind of sauna for their house?
I think I got the best one person affordable sauna I can get that passes that test. And that was $2,800 total.
2,800. Okay. USD
Yeah.
for
USD.
Americans.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I mean, might sound like a lot, or it depends, who you are. But in terms of like cost benefit and what it does for me, it's like it was easily the best investment I've ever made. And so also comparing it to what I'd be paying to go to whether that's like a health spa or something like that weekly,
Mhm.
that adds up quite quickly. So over the long term, it made sense for me at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to think about it as an investment for your health and cost per use. Because, like, if you can get 10 years out of it and you go in it every day or
Mhm.
something like that, or a few times a week, cost per use is like pennies. So that's how I rationalize all my purchases.
Well, there's an interesting company called TrueMed. It's the founder of Kettle and Fire bone broth.
Okay.
You can get health brands with pre-tax dollars, so there's like a cost incentive, and so they partnered with all these health companies that allow you to get their products at a cheaper cost. And I think they just got Clearlight Saunas, which is one of the good sauna companies, in their program. So there perhaps might be more affordable options coming. Yeah, I
Very
thought that was pretty cool.
cool. Yeah, I was just about to ask you if you had any favorite brands or recommended brands for like an at-home sauna. So one's called Clear Light.
Clearlight is fortunately like also the big player in the space,
Mm.
and they do it right. That group kind of validated their products. And then the other one is a small company in Canada, which is the one I got called Sunstream, not Sunlighten, Sunstream. So those are the two good brands people can look up. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Second to last question. If listeners could take away one thing from you, your book, our conversation today, what would you want that message to be?
Sweat is the most wildly underappreciated aspect of taking care of your health and preventing disease, and sauna is the best way to sweat.
I love that. Concise, to the point. Amazing. And then, very lastly, where can listeners find out more about you, get connected, or grab your book?
Yes. So hopefully we can link to the Amazon link for the book. I'll just show one more time if it's not in the picture. It's a really easy read. It's under 130 pages. I really didn't want any fluff in there. A lot of people get through it in a day or two. And then in terms of connecting with me, if people want to email with any questions or comments, my email is justin@sweatthebook.com. And my Twitter handle is Hey Justin Glaser, and Instagram is Justin Glaser7.
Amazing. Justin, thank
Yeah.
you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ellie.